The scream tore through Maplewood Community Park like a blade ripping fabric, sharp, sudden, and impossible to ignore. It wasn't the kind of cry children used when they fell off a swing or lost sight of their parents for a moment. No, this one carried something rawer, something that made adults freeze and turn before they even understood why. It was fear pure, pleading, desperate fear. And it came from a 6-year-old girl sprinting across the pavement as though the ground itself were chasing her. Her tiny shoes slapped against the concrete, the sound frantic and uneven. Her breaths came in high, broken gasps. Her arms pumped wildly, her face wet with tears that had carved frantic lines down her cheeks. She wasn't just running, she was fleeing, and she wasn't looking for safety. She was looking for someone who could create it. The man she ran toward, Charles Whitmore, age 45, wealthy, well-dressed, composed, lifted his head at the sound, mid-sentence in a heated phone call that had consumed most of his afternoon. His world, usually a carefully arranged gallery of logic and control, stuttered when the girl collided with him. Her small hands gripped his coat as tightly as if she believed it might be the only solid object left in the world. Her fingers were icy, trembling, desperate. "Please help my grandma," she cried, the plea bursting out of her in a single fractured breath, the kind of plea that didn't ask, it begged. Charles blinked, stunned by the sudden contact, his mind scrambling to reconcile the situation. A child he'd never seen before, terrified beyond measure, clinging to him like a refuge. He lowered his phone slowly, the voice on the other end fading into irrelevance. "Hurting who?" he asked, his voice caught between calm instinct and rising concern. Anna turned, tears dripping off her chin. She pointed with a shaking arm toward the deeper side of the park. "Them," she whispered, then louder. "Them! They won't let her go." Only then did Charles follow her line of sight. What he saw tightened his jaw and ignited a sensation he hadn't have felt in years' anger sharpened by memory. An elderly woman, thin and fragile, bent beneath the weight of age and exhaustion, struggled on her knees. Her small frame, wrapped in a faded brown cardigan, shivered as she tried to gather spilled bottles and cans from a torn recycling bag. The bag's contents were scattered across the walkway like the aftermath of a storm. But the storm hadn't been nature. It had been 3 men, young, loud, and soaked in reckless cruelty. Troy, tall with restless aggression burning in his posture, kicked the recycling bag again, sending cans bouncing across the pavement like tiny fleeing animals. Mason, stockier, held up his cracked phone and filmed the scene, smirking as if capturing entertainment for his followers. And Jeb, broad-shouldered, bored, and dangerous in his indifference, stomped hard on any bottle that dared remain intact. Ruth Miller, grandmother, caretaker, gentle soul, did not fight back. She simply endured. She reached for bottles with trembling fingers, her movements slow, her breath uneven. "Move, old lady," Troy barked. "I said move." Ruth didn't lift her head. "I just need to pick up my things, boys," she murmured softly. "Let me be." Jeb stepped closer until his boot landed inches from her hand. "Nah, you go when we say you go." The cruelty dripped from their voices, not loud but deliberate, practiced, comfortable. The kind of cruelty that grows when no one intervenes, and no one had, until now. "Help her," Anna begged again, tugging harder at Charles's coat. "Please." Her entire body shook, not from cold but from helpless terror. The kind of terror a child should never know. Charles felt a familiar conflict rip through him. His instinct told him to step in immediately, decisively, but experience whispered caution. A wealthy man, 3 unstable young men, cell phones recording, bystanders watching, headlines forming before punches even landed. Wealthy executive attacks local teens. Altercation in public park sparks investigation. Who escalated first? He could already see the narrative spinning beyond control. And then Harlan stepped out of the SUV, his driver for 13 years, his quiet anchor in chaotic moments. Harlan's eyes scanned the scene, lingering on Ruth struggling to stand. His voice came low, steady, almost gentle. "Sir." That could be anyone's mother, The words struck Charles harder than any shove ever could. A memory cracked open inside him like glass under pressure, the day his own mother collapsed in a hospital lobby. Strangers blocking the hall, time moving too slowly. The helplessness. The regret. The silent vow he had made afterward. Never again. Something shifted inside him. Something irrevocable. Not rage. Not recklessness. Resolve. Quiet. Heavy. Unshakable. He slipped his phone into his pocket without looking at it again. "Stay behind me," he told Anna. She obeyed instantly, gripping the back of his coat like it was a lifeline that could pull her out of an undertow. Charles moved with long, controlled strides toward the confrontation, each step echoing across the concrete. His polished shoes clicked sharply, slicing through the men's laughter. A sound made Troy look up first. He straightened, scanning Charles from head to toe. "Who are you supposed to be?" Charles didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence said enough. He glanced at Ruth, first still on her knees, chest trembling with shallow breaths, before shifting his stare to the three men blocking her path. When he spoke, his voice carried a quiet authority that cut deeper than shouting ever could. "Let her go." Mason lowered his phone a fraction, smirk curling at the edges. "Relax, man. We're just having some fun." "It doesn't look like fun," Charles replied, his tone as sharp as polished steel. Jeb stepped forward, shoulders squared. "What? You her hero now?" Charles held his gaze. "She's an elderly woman. She deserves respect, not harassment." Troy rolled his eyes. "Respect? She's digging through trash, dude." "Ain't no respect in that." Ruth tried to stand, but her foot slipped on a loose bottle. She stumbled forward with a small cry. Anna jerked forward instinctively to help her, but before she could reach her grandmother, Jeb shoved an arm out, blocking the child. "Back off, kid." Anna fell to her knees. "Stop it. Leave her alone." That was it. That was the moment the line snapped. Not just for Charles. For the entire park. He moved faster than the three men expected, catching Anna before she hit the ground. She buried her face in his coat, trembling. Troy laughed. "Look at this. Rich guy playing daddy." Charles looked up slowly. His eyes had changed. All the warmth drained out, leaving something cold and deliberate behind. "Move," he said. "Now." And for the first time the men hesitated. Because some voices don't need to shout to be dangerous. Some warnings whisper. And some strangers on ordinary Sunday evenings decide they will no longer walk away. For a long stretched moment, nothing in Maplewood Community Park dared to move. Even the breeze seemed to hold itself back, as if waiting for anyone to decide what happened next. The three men stood across from Charles, their swagger flickering as uncertainty crept into the cracks of their bravado. Ruth's labored breathing whistled faintly behind him, a painful reminder of how fragile she was. And Anna, clutching the fabric of Charles's coat, looked up at him with a trust he hadn't earned but suddenly felt responsible for. It was Jeb who broke first. Not with an apology or retreat, but with a nervous snort that tried weakly to patch together the crumbling front the three had worn so confidently minutes earlier. "Man, what's this guy's problem?" he muttered, looking to Mason for support. Mason didn't answer immediately. His phone was still raised, still recording, but the amusement had drained from his expression. The phone trembled ever so slightly in his hand. For the first time, he wasn't filming for attention. He was filming because he didn't know what else to do. Troy, the unofficial leader of their little pack, puffed his chest and stepped forward with forced bravado. The kind of false courage that grows loud when shame starts whispering truths it can't afford to accept. "Old man," he said, voice sharp, "I don't know who you think you're talking to, but you better back up." Charles didn't move. He didn't flinch. He didn't sway. Instead, he lowered his chin slightly, a small, controlled motion that somehow made him appear taller, more anchored, more immovable. He looked directly at Troy with an expression that held not anger, but judgment. Quiet judgment. The kind that makes a person suddenly aware of the weight of their own actions. "I'm talking," Charles said softly, "to three boys who don't understand the difference between being tough and being cruel." The words landed with a heavy thud, echoing in the silent park. Jeb blinked. Mason swallowed hard. Troy scoffed loudly, too loudly, like someone trying to convince himself he wasn't losing control of the situation. "You really think you can walk up here and lecture us?" Troy barked. "No," Charles replied calmly. "I think I can tell you to stop. And if we don't?" "You will." The certainty in that answer rattled them. Even Anna, trembling at Charles's side, felt the shift, the change in atmosphere that happens right before reality chooses a side. Ruth pushed herself slowly to her feet, gripping the railing of the picnic structure to steady her shaking legs. Her chest rose and fell too quickly, each breath a struggle. "Sir," she whispered weakly, "please don't make this worse." Charles didn't look back. "Ma'am," he said gently, "they've already made it worse." The honesty of the statement hit Ruth like a truth she had been trying to avoid. She lowered her head, exhausted and defeated. Troy stepped forward again, closing the gap between them to a dangerous distance. "What are you going to do, huh?" he challenged. "Threaten us? Hit us? You touch me, and I swear—" "I won't touch you," Charles interrupted. His voice didn't rise. His tone didn't sharpen. But the words held the weight of a man who had made up his mind long before arriving in this park. "I don't need to," Mason finally spoke, his voice uneven. "Dude, maybe we should chill." The old lady's struggling. Troy spun on him with a glare. "Shut up, Mason." Mason flinched at the tone. The first domino fell. Charles's stance softened just enough to guide Anna gently behind him. She pressed herself into the back of his coat, peeking out cautiously. He placed a calming hand on her arm, not taking his eyes off the three men. "You don't have to prove anything," Charles said to them, his voice firm but not unkind. "You're not impressing anyone. Not the people watching online, not each other, and certainly not yourselves." Jeb shifted uncomfortably, rubbing the back of his neck. Mason lowered his phone an inch, not by choice, but because shame tugged his arm downward. But Troy's pride was a wildfire, and humiliation had just thrown gasoline on it. "Look at you," Troy spat. "Think you're some kind of hero? Think people like you get to walk around telling others what to do?" "No," Charles said. "I think people like me have a responsibility to stop people like you when you cross a line." "A line?" Troy laughed. "We didn't even touch her. You shoved a child," Charles replied. And in that moment, those 4 words shattered every remaining illusion the young men hid behind. Ruth gasped sharply. Anna's grip on Charles tightened. Mason swore under his breath. Jeb paled, but Troy doubled down. "Nobody cares," he snapped. "Kids fall all the time." "And she," he said, pointing at Ruth with a careless flick of his wrist, "is just some trash lady digging through bins." Anna let out a sound that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite a scream. It was heartbreak strangled inside a child's throat. Charles's jaw clenched, hard. His breath came slow and controlled. A single long inhale, a single steady exhale. Every muscle in his body tightened not with aggression, but with decision. He stepped forward, 1 step, just one. But it wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Troy's smirk faltered. "Hey, back up." Charles didn't back up. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket. Slowly, deliberately. The 3 men stiffened. Even Anna held her breath. Ruth's hand covered her mouth. And then Charles pulled out a pair of leather gloves. He didn't rush, didn't dramatize. He simply slipped one glove over his right hand, then the other over his left, each movement smooth and precise. "What are you doing?" Mason asked nervously. Charles tightened the wrist strap. "Nothing," he said. He raised his gloved hands and flexed them gently, as if preparing for cold weather rather than conflict. Yet, that single word sent a ripple through the 3 men. Not fear. Not exactly. Something deeper. Something instinctive. The primal realization that the situation had shifted beyond the boundaries they were comfortable mocking. Jeb whispered, "Troy, maybe we should go." "No," Troy muttered. "He's bluffing." "He's not," Mason said under his breath. Charles lowered his hands. "Troy," he said calmly, "this is the last time I'll ask. Walk away." "What if I don't?" Charles didn't blink. "Then you'll learn," he said simply. What consequences feel like? Troy's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, too close, until Charles could feel the heat of his breath. This is our park, Troy growled. No, Charles replied. This is a public park. And right now, you're trespassing on decency, not property. Mason let out an involuntary laugh, a shaky, disbelieving exhale. Jeb looked between them like a man praying for a time machine. Ruth whispered, Please stop. But the world wasn't listening to her anymore. It was listening to the tension crackling between the two men. Troy's nostrils flared, his fist clenched. And Charles stood like a stone carved for the sole purpose of blocking storms. You touch her again, Charles said. You touch the child, or the grandmother, or even one piece of that bag? He leaned in just enough to make the next words land like judgment. And you will regret it. The wind stirred again. The clouds thickened overhead. The park dimmed, as if the universe were lowering the lights for the next act. And for the first time, Troy finally realized he wasn't the biggest force in this park. Not tonight. The silence that followed was dense and heavy, so thick it felt like the air itself had stopped moving. Anna clung to the back of Charles's coat. Ruth held the railing like she might collapse. Jeb and Mason exchanged looks that finally showed doubt instead of arrogance. And Troy, whose entire identity was built on never backing down, felt something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. Fear, not of Charles, but of what he himself had almost become. Still, he tried to mask it. You think you scare me? He said, but the bravado was cracked, thinning at the edges. Charles didn't respond. He didn't look angry, only disappointed, something far worse. I'm not here to scare you, he said quietly. I'm here to remind you who you could be, and who you shouldn't become. Mason swallowed and slowly pocketed his phone, ending the recording. Dude, maybe we should stop. It was never funny, Charles replied, eyes fixed on Troy. Ruth's voice trembled. We're not your enemies. We're just trying to go home. That one word home hit the boys harder than anything else. Home was supposed to be safety, and they had taken that away from an old woman and a child. Jeb shifted uncomfortably. Let's go, man, he said to Troy. Enough. But Troy couldn't step back. Admitting he was wrong felt like stepping off a cliff, so he snapped, You don't know anything about us. I know enough, Charles answered. Enough to see three young men pretending not to care. That's the saddest kind of pretending. Troy's jaw tightened, but his eyes didn't hold the same fire. They held confusion and shame. Look at her, Charles said softly, nodding toward Anna. She's scared, not because you're strong, but because you forgot she's human. Troy flinched. Slowly, painfully, he forced himself to meet Anna's gaze, her small face, her trembling hands, her quiet fear. And for the first time tonight, something in him cracked open. I didn't mean to, Troy started. Yes, Charles said gently. You did. But now you can mean something better. The offer hung between them like a bridge Troy didn't know how to cross. Mason exhaled. He's right, let's just be done. Jeb nodded. Seriously, enough. Troy finally lowered his eyes. Fine, he muttered. We'll go. He took a step back, then stopped. Something inside him wouldn't let him walk away without one more thing being said. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry. To the kid. And to you. Ruth's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she whispered. Anna peeked out again, sensing the anger had passed. Charles nodded. You did the right thing. That's what matters now. The three boys turned and walked away slower, quieter, carrying the weight of what almost happened. Not defeated, not broken, but changed. And the night felt a little safer for it.